Phil now?
Yeah, I'll tell you in 30 seconds. Okay, you're now live. I'm just going to pass host over to.
Avi, if you could control the admitting, please.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Wednesday Night Live. I'm delighted to welcome this evening the worshipful, the Mayor Councillor Caroline Stock. We cannot pass this evening, bearing in mind that we are talking to the Mayor. We cannot pass this evening without remembering Brian Gordon, who sadly passed away a few months ago. He would have been the Mayor now, but for COVID and of course his untimely death. I'm sure that I speak for everyone when I wish his family well and long life. He will be remembered for his many years as councillor and for all he did on behalf of the Edgware community. The community has lost a friend and a colleague. He is sadly missed. Councillor Caroline Stock was born in Barnet, and I believe she's lived in Totteridge most, if not all, of her life. So she is well versed in Barnet matters. She studied for a BSc in human biology at King's College, and she worked at different hospitals, including Chelsea Hospital for Women and Queen Charlotte's Hospital, and obtained a PhD at the Royal Postgraduate Medical School. She was a governor of Woodridge Primary School in Woodside Park and learnt important skills in the role as the Special Educational Needs Link. She helped coordinate a homeless winter shelter in collaboration with Together in Barnet and Homeless Action for Barnet. Caroline was elected onto Barnet Council in 2014 and has taken a special interest in children and health. Following on from this, she is trying to raise understanding of type 2 diabetes. She continues this work as chairman of the Health and Wellbeing Board. She completed her year as deputy mayor of Barnet in 2019 and then became the 55th mayor of the London Borough of Barnet and will remain so until May 2021. I am delighted to welcome the worshipful, the Mayor, Councillor Caroline Stock.
Very odd to hear my life before me, but anyway.
I'm sorry, that wasn't everything, but I tried to get in a little bit.
You did that. Thank you very, very much indeed. Well, hello, everybody. I'm just really going to give you a year, really, which is nearly a year coming up. I will finish this May. And as you've said, I wasn't intending to be mayor. I had originally become the deputy mayor, and then I then was asked, would I become the mayor? And often, in fact, majority of times, and I explained to David actually earlier today, that actually the majority of times Barnet Met people don't go on to become mayor because it's a very, very time consuming occupation, and most people, some do and some don't, or they do it 5 years later. But I in fact became deputy, then mayor, and then because of what happened to Brian and also because of COVID, I have continued. And what I want to talk about this evening is really a year in the life of this very strange COVID. And I just wanted to show this one picture just to begin sort of putting it into perspective. So normally there are 33 London boroughs and a Westminster Abbey. There's a very big ceremony and all the boroughs get together, and that was the one the year before. And I, of course, had been there the year before that. But coming up this year was very, very strange because at Westminster Abbey, nobody this year could meet. They all had to go in a long, long line. You normally have a ceremony like a sort of Thanksgiving in the pews at Westminster Abbey where the choir sit. So it was all done with masks and no one could speak. There was no pictures, and it was a very peculiar ceremony. So I'm going to start off last February, March, a year ago, when I had the ambassador of Cyprus was there, and with the Mayor of Morphu. And it does have, in some ways, it's quite interesting. We have 9 twin towns, but this town is actually in the occupied territory in Cyprus, and they came over and we signed the 25 years of our union, and it was a very big thing. And at that time they came in, and we had the Cypriot television. In that picture, I believe you had Matthew Offord came to speak to you last week. He's in the picture, and then there's the Vice Chancellor, the head of the Middlesex University, and the Mayor, and the Ambassador for Cyprus. And there was a big photographic exhibition. And at that time, we were all spacing apart because we knew there was something going on, and we didn't shake hands. It was all very odd. And they were meant to come into the mayor's parlour, which happens when there's a ceremony, and we actually restricted the numbers. So we were already beginning to understand that there was some very serious things happening. And also, the day after that, they visited. We were meant to go to Israel on a tour with our other twin town, and that was cancelled. So what happened? All of a sudden, being mayor was very different. And I felt very strongly that I shouldn't just sit at home, but during the first lockdown, I just went and did lots and lots and lots of messaging. Maybe some of you have saw me with different messaging. I mean, literally, I've done hundreds of videos. But we were coming up to Passover, and I realised that looking at the statistics, as you said, I was chairman. Now I am chairman of the Health and Wellbeing Board. And it was the one thing I didn't want to give up. And I could see what was happening with a number of deaths in the Jewish community. And the Rebbitzin from Woodside Park, who is the most wonderful lady, Cllr Hachenbroch, I said to her, please, can I come into your garden? I'll walk to your house. And if we space out, we have got to give a message. And we did. We gave a message to say, please order online, because we were going, you could see people in Golders Green when they were buying, no one was distancing. And so it was very important. So that's one of the things that I've definitely taken on. And there's been lots and lots. I'm sort of running through what happened, but, you know, we started to issue numbers and how to stay safe in the first lockdown. And Public Health Barnet have really very much been at the centre of that. And I thought I'd show you somebody who maybe some of you have actually seen is the Director of Public Health, which is Dr. Tamara Juretic, who I work very closely with. And again, another messaging, I said to her, look, I'd spoken to her on the phone, and I said, coming up to Easter, there'd been big issues on the news about people meeting in parks. And I said, this is really bad. Tomorrow you've got to come and we've got to do a video. She goes, I don't do videos, Caroline. I said, you are. You're going to. She said, but I'm not even dressed. I'm in my pajamas. And I said, we're going to get in the car, and you can see there were no cars at that point. There's a big car park by a pub. And we drove in, and there was a police car there. And she goes, we're going to be arrested. But in fact, I actually said to the policeman, I said, will you be in our video to actually give the information? He said, I can't do that. So I said, you'll have to hold the camera. She said, anyway. And he did that. And then that was one of the other messages. But she has been amazing. And I don't know, any of you might have well seen messages that have come out from the Director of Public Health. There was something that started off, this is one of my fellow councillors, and in some ways it's actually, I put it in to show that I'm a Conservative councillor, she's a Labour councillor, but that has gone by the by. We're all working together, and this was raising money for the Community Response Fund, where people can apply, and there's another lot of funding coming up, either for £500 or £2,000, and it's given instantly, and we raise money for that. But there's been very much working together and with all communities, and that's been fantastic. Middlesex University were also incredible at the beginning when they needed to make visors in their department where they do all their mechanics and things. They got everyone together, bought in all the stuff, and they made the visors. And I sort of, as a PR thing, we gave an interview. I interviewed all the different people, and then the film crew went up to the textile departments, and they were making the gowns for the doctors. And they're an incredible. So Middlesex is very central to our Barnet borough. They have 19, or did have 19,000 students, and they're one of the largest employers, and they are amazing. They have a huge nursing department who've been helping in Barnet. So one of the things I very much wanted to do was make sure that I wasn't, while I was legally allowed to go out, I went and helped make food. This is actually in Edgware at the Stonegrove Centre, and then food was being made very quickly, stored and then given out. And it was all of all types of food, and trying to cater for many different, tastes. Food banks, now that's something you've probably heard about. I've visited a number of food banks, and unfortunately they are very much needed at the moment. A little bit of controversy about whether we have to be very careful. We've had recently that some people have been going along and picking what they want, but it's very much people are given an amount of food to sustain them, for we can top up their food. And they're again helping moving things around. Now in Edgware again, you've got your bus shelter, your bus garage, and we went along there. There was a fantastic organisation who came in, and they were supplying soups. It was a Jewish organisation, funny enough, and we went in there, and then I went round and I met them all, because of course without having all our services, everything would come to a grinding halt. And I think that's something hopefully all of us have realised, is that each part of us are a jigsaw that actually is allowing Barnet to keep going, and England to keep going. So you can't get, the nurses and the doctors and everyone else can't get to their hospitals if there aren't any transportations. Barnet Civic Awards is something that every year they normally come to the town hall. People, and it's, I think I put it in so that you're aware of what goes on, and you can then every just around Christmas time they put nominations in. But this year they come to the town hall with their families, and there's a big ceremony, and of course we couldn't do that this year. So I said that's absolutely not gonna, if we can't do that, I will go to their homes. So that's exactly what I did. And for the pictures I took off my mask, but at the beginning we were allowed at this stage, this was the early on, there was no lockdown. I went to each of their homes and gave it to them, and it was wonderful because their families were there in their gardens, and I think at least that way they were given their awards. But there's been a lot of issues, and I think the Chinese community felt very vulnerable at the beginning. Remember, we're still at the beginning of the pandemic, and Sir Kenneth Alicia is the Lord Lieutenant for London, and he felt it was very important that we all got together. So we had a big, everything's on Zoom, and I'm sure you're all zoomed out by this, but we had the police and representatives from everywhere, and there were hundreds and hundreds of Chinese communities throughout London. I went representing Barnet as the mayor, and trying to say to the Chinese population, please don't worry, we're all very much supporting you. Schools, of course, there were big issues. What was going to happen with schools and distancing and everything else. So we had webinars for school heads and for religious leaders. And I'm sure your rabbi would have been certainly able to come to this. And there's the London Jewish Forum, which facilitated this one. And I think what they've done is incredible. But then equally, there's we've had for the Muslim group, again, there's another, you know, everyone very much wanted to find what the truth was, the facts. And that's very much come out really with vaccinations, which I'll come to later. I've done lots and lots of talks and going the highs and lows, but this was actually, there was a question and answer at Woodside Park. There's some of the London mayors, everyone got together with the clapping. We did one day when we all went out in our gardens or wherever else, and everyone clapped for the NHS. It's a very strange thing. These are sort of landmarks. It's almost like, as I went through doing this, I realised there are these big landmarks that we've gone through, that every Thursday people at 8 o'clock coming outside the houses and clapping. This is, I don't know, maybe because I can't interact with you, but there's GIFT is an amazing organisation underneath Jewish Futures, and it's an organisation that for many years I've known about, and they wanted to thank their volunteers. And I don't know, at Brent Cross they'd set up a huge cinema, and what happened was people came up onto the stage. They actually sadly had to close it down because it wasn't viable. But because everyone couldn't meet up, what they did was all the people arrived in their cars, and maybe some of your community even went. And I was very clear when we went, I said, whatever happens, it has to be COVID safe. Absolutely, they said. But there you go, you can see at some point, I think there was a disco thing, and they all said, come out your cars and, you know, clap or something, which they did. And then of course, what can you do? They all came out and wanted to see each other. But in fact, I was in my car, and I actually got out the car and I said, you've all got to go back in your cars. And I think I thought I was horrible. But of course, it's from things like that, very, very simple things like that, that were just allowing the disease to spread. And that really comes to this one. It was an event that I was opening a new cafe in Free in Barnet, and everyone who was organising it had completely complied with what we asked, and we planted a tree on the left-hand side. But then outside, everyone was mingling, and I just said, "This is I can't be here. It is too dangerous." And it's been a very strange year, because that's what I love doing, is meeting people. But in fact, we got the police down. And we said they have to distance themselves, and then, because they should have put lines and things like that. And it's very dangerous. This is how the disease spread early on. So people were allowed to go back to the gyms, and there was a big celebration. In the picture, there was a gentleman who was on that machine who was absolutely adamant he wanted to be in the picture, because he said he was so excited about the gyms opening. And these are the people who run the gyms, and the person with the red tie is a very wonderful colleague of mine, Sachin Rajput, who is the head of adult services, and we went there together. And in fact, there was a wonderful couple, and he said, "I've got to speak to you." He said, "I'm diabetic." And he said, "It's just marvellous." He said, this is fantastic that we can open the sort of gyms up again. And I think that's something that has been so sad, is that we've had to stop people playing sport. I mean, I can't even believe I'm saying that we had to stop sports. I mean, it's mad anyway. And he said he'd lost a huge amount of weight, and it had made his diabetes better. Well-being of children is very important, and this was we went along to the Graham Park estate, and we gave out, it's my husband there with the medals, who's been by my side the last 3 years, just silently being there and helping me. I wanted to include some of the things that have been going on, even though there's been COVID. This was a project at Trinity Church in Burnt Oak, and the vicar is the one sitting down on the floor, and he is incredible, Duncan. Completely inspirational. He's in a community where really and truly there is such poverty and such deprivation. The polytunnel, which now you can see, I went back again a few months ago, just before the lockdown. They're now growing all their vegetables, and they're trying to show people how to grow things, and how to for people who haven't got jobs, but maybe they might consider going back into gardening and parks and open spaces, and then getting employed that way, and also ex-offenders. In that same church, one of the things that we're going to try and support is, you mentioned, David, that for 6 years I helped run a winter shelter for the homeless at my synagogue, but of course it all had to stop with COVID. But these are self-contained units that can be put within a building, outside the building, and that's what these are going to be doing in that church. Getting the balance right, I put this in because this was at Victoria Park, and I was getting huge amounts of letters for people to say, how can you allow this to happen? And you can see here there wasn't really social distancing, and in fact in the end it was closed down. But there has to be a balance. And going to Graham Park, when I met people in the shop, it is very difficult. It has been very difficult to get the balance right, because people also have to, at that stage, children have been cooped up, and particularly at the moment, I saw someone yesterday, so I don't know if I can do this much longer with their small children. I wanted to sing and shout about some of the things that Barnet's brilliant at. We've opened up Silkstream and Montrose Park. It's a brand new, huge area. I've just picked a few of these. There's a skate park, and there's all sorts of things, activities for young people, and tennis. And one of the things, there was Love Parks Week. And again, that was a video I did sort of explaining to people how important it was to be outside. Mental health has been a very big issue, sadly, at this time. But going into parks and open spaces, it really does improve your health. And we're so privileged in Barnet to have such a huge amount. We've got over 200 parks and open spaces and beautiful nature reserves. This was Armed Forces Days. Normally there's a huge big parade, and we do a whole lot of things in Barnet. And here it was actually the only time I went into that's the parlour there. The only time I've been allowed back, we did and then we raised the flag because it's all the buildings have been closed. You said about diabetes, and it's one of my hobby horses, and it's something that I haven't stopped during COVID. I've done all sorts of things, and at Brent Cross, one of the things that first alerted me to it, we had a big day where we had testing, HbA1c tests, which do, rather than the pinprick tests that do it immediately what your sugar is, this does a 3-month exposure of your sugar. And we found out of 100 people that we tested coming down the escalators at Brent Cross and saying to them in the foyer, would you like to be tested if they were in a category that was at risk? Half the people tested, half, were actually either diabetic or pre-diabetic. And I said, this has to change. And from there, we've done all sorts of things. And one of the things that came out of that was launching 6 Barnet Health Heritage Walks.
Sorry.
Go online.
Madam Mayor, we've lost your sound. We've lost your visual as well. Not the screen sharing. If you can hear me, it may be. Yeah, your sound has broken up. If you can hear me, if you could, I'm just wondering if possibly an idea might be to reboot, but just try again. I apologise to everybody for a technical hitch. Madam Mayor, can you hit? Oops, there we are. In the meantime, please talk amongst yourselves. Madam Mayor will be back very shortly. And a very interesting talk from her. There's much going on in the borough and locally. While we are waiting, if I could let you know that next Wednesday evening, whilst we wait for the Mayor to rejoin us, next Wednesday evening, our guest is Linda Fishman. The topic is A Positive Future from the Depths of Despair. When Linda was 13, her mother and 2 sisters were killed in an Air Canada plane crash. Her father fell into a deep depression and she was left but to fend for herself. A teen with big dreams, Linda mustered up the courage to become happy and to lead a meaningful life. Amongst her many accomplishments, Linda became a clinical social worker and therapist, summer camp director, college professor, author, and inspirational speaker. Do please join us next week to hear this very inspirational speaker.
Is that better? Am I connected?
Oh, you're back on, yes.
Fine, okay. Oh. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I don't know what happened.
That's
I don't
okay.
know what happened there.
That's okay, welcome back.
Right, I don't know quite. Can you see my slides? Yes.
No, we can just see you. You need to share screen.
I don't know why that's not happening. Hold on. Hold on, let me just. So sorry about this. You know what I'm going to do? I should just, for some reason the screen is not. I will just, maybe I'll have to just do it. My computer, for some reason, it's gone unstable. What I'll do is, so I'll just, until it stabilizes, but you can hear me, can you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, right. So I should just explain. So one of the things that I'd set up was something called the Mayor of Barnet's Golden Kilometre. I don't know if you can't see any of the pictures.
No, we can't. I think we've lost you again.
I don't know how. Can you go back? You just put my screen to. Okay. You know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe just do it then without any pictures. So you've got the 6 Herald. I then started to promote healthy eating, and I did sort of classes, where I did sort of food. I sort of sat there and did cooking, and actually did it on a video so people could see how you could make a meal without for under £5, and also did lots of different exercise things. I mean, if you could see the slide I have now, I don't quite know why. Anyway, there was one of the big problems is in Barnet, and generally, is that 20% of our children are obese or overweight, which is tragic, really. And so the Mayor of Barnet's Golden Kilometre, in lots of our parks and open spaces now, we have routes where they've actually got marked and measured routes, and we put the money into that, and we will be doing more of that. And that's been an incredible initiative. And Middlesex University, they actually decided that they would actually turn the university into a kilometre route, and we went on a wonderful walk with all of their nursing staff, and we did a big route, and I've got a picture showing that with their guide dogs. We've invested in a PhD student now who's actually going to show us that by being healthy for children, particularly looking at primary schools, if they do a kilometre a day, it makes a massive difference, and children not only become, it's sort of, if you do it in the middle of the day, it will stop children sort of falling asleep in the afternoon. It's proved to be absolutely amazing. So we're trying very hard to promote that with public health. The next picture on my slide is a sad picture in a way, because it's showing Remembrance Sunday. And I don't know, you probably know that near the town hall in the boroughs, there's a big, when you're going along the bypass, there's a very large war memorial. And normally there's hundreds of people gather. And in fact, what happened was there this year, there were just a few of us, there were a handful, apart from one person who wrote especially to the mayor's office. He'd been a fighter pilot, and he said that as far as he was concerned, he was dying, and it was one of his last wishes to be at the Remembrance Sunday, and that's what he did. And I then, the next slide that I have is I went round to all the war memorials quietly during the day, because a lot of the, if you remember rightly, a lot of the ceremonies, they had been cancelled. So I personally went round to all the war memorials in Barnet and laid a wreath where there hadn't been one. So there was always a wreath where, and some of the war memorials in Barnet are in cemeteries and things. It was actually quite interesting, but I just quietly stood there and so just had my thoughts, and so every war memorial had a wreath. And it's such a shame you can't see the next slides, but I had contacted Caroline. I don't know if any of you'd seen the Royal Free programmes where they'd gone in with a film crew during COVID. And I was very privileged. I said to them, I would very much, while COVID, so we're now going sort of into just in October, I said November, and I said I'd like to come in, and we went along to Barnet Hospital, and I met with the ITU department, and they were completely exhausted at that stage, and they said really very much that they weren't sure if they could cope with the second wave. And of course, look what happened. We had it far earlier than we thought. And I was very privileged. Caroline Clark, who is the head of the Royal Free Trust, I went round with her, and Debbie Saunders, who is the is the chairman of the Barnet Hospital. And they explained all the different things we went round. And one of the departments we went round was the long COVID department. And I'm sure some of you have had who have had COVID. This is something that's a new syndrome. I mean, it's not, these are all new things, but we've really got to be very careful to understand how important it is that we recognise something like long COVID. What was incredible, though, going around was there's a new ward, the Rainbow Ward at Barnet. Somehow, in like about 2.5 months, they actually completely built a new ward. So anyone, because Barnet now is accepting a lot of patients, they have far more ITU beds than any other hospital in the area. And what they did was they turned normal wards into ITU beds. And I think that's been very successful. Thankfully, the levels now, the number of people, ITU will always be full because operations that happen, people go there, but operations, aren't happening at the moment. But what happens is when you're intubated, it's really, and go on a ventilator, it's really the last resort, because to come off that is so difficult. There's again, I'm so sad you can't see the slide, but there's one of the I wish maybe I should get it up on something, but there's a picture, or maybe when you actually put it live, I can send you my slides. I decided with somebody else, like one of the things I really wanted to do was to try somehow and bring smiles to your door. And so we went to there's a shop in Barnet, and what they do is they have all recycled plants, or plants that aren't sold, and they repackage them and feed them, and then all of a sudden they can be given out. And so what we did was we've gone to people with Jamie and Age UK and Joy, which is Joined Old and Young, and they did pictures of for the children, or did things and put it in laminated sleeves, and they can use that as a sort of placemat. And it was wonderful. It was going to all the elderly and giving them these plants and flowers, and it's actually still continuing. Barnet Health Champions is something hopefully you've heard about, and anyone can become a member. You can go online and find out about it. And the Barnet Health Champions are people who get all the information from Barnet. We've now got over 200 people. And if you want to know a little bit more about COVID and the real facts, that's what it's trying to do, to make sure the information being given out and sort of in WhatsApp groups and things like that, because lots and lots of roads now have these local WhatsApp groups, is correct information. In the meantime, sort of, again, I wish I could show you, but there's a shop I'd gone to, the Mayor of Brent said, would I come with him, again, before we were all in a lockdown, and there was a new shop in Hendon, a food shop, and it was a Nigerian shop. And the most wonderful woman met me, and she said, did I know about Nigerian food? And I said, I knew a little bit, you know, I knew about. She said, what do you like? So you never lie. And I said, well, I love cassava, and I've made curries with that. And so sure enough, as I left, I had this whole thing of Nigerian food. And but it was a wonderful shop that's opened up in Vivian Avenue. Vodafone, another shop that I'd gone, and the picture you can see is where, of course, we're not allowed to have anyone around. Normally you'd have people around, and of course the shop had to be empty, and I cut the ribbon and without anyone there. It's also strange, but they very much wanted to open up. And the next slide that I have is of Millbrook Park in Mill Hill, which I'm sure lots of you go past, where the army barracks was. And I did a topping out ceremony. So I'm trying very hard to make sure, and again, all socially distanced, but that people can at least have ceremonies that they would normally have, that the mayor would go to, that I make sure if I can, I do attend. And there was a community space in Whetstone, another big one on a huge development where the builders had finished it. And they very much wanted, because I think that's what the mayor does. I mean, it's not me that goes along, it's the mayor in a robe or with a chain, and they somehow sort of sprinkle some magic fairy dust on that little occasion that makes it special. We're coming up to Hanukkah, and they asked, would I do outside the town hall, could we have a big Hanukkah lights? And Chabad were marvellous. And I said, but you've got to be careful. We can't have crowds, you know, it will just be shut down. And in fact, there was a wonderful rabbi came, and we lit huge Hanukkah outside the town hall, and it was wonderful. And every night then another candle was lit. But the next slide I have is a huge big Christmas tree. And again, that was something they always have a mayor, but I could only go along normally when there's lots of Christmas trees that a mayor switches the lights on. And then you have all the children there, and you have bands playing and singing and carol concerts. And of course, none of that's been able to happen. One of the things I went to was St Margarets in Edgware at Christmas time. And I was very concerned because I hadn't been in a place of worship, and it's very difficult. I am Jewish, and it's something that I will go into church, but I was very concerned, having not been in a place of worship, but they assured me it was very safe in Edgware. And they had these big screens where there was people singing, and in the slide you can see that they were singing. And I was thinking, I just hope that it's COVID safe. And for 2 weeks afterwards, I was just very worried about that. But Matthew Offord, who came to speak to you last week, he actually didn't come. And there was like a tannoy that when he was meant to speak, he came over. This tannoy was almost like God speaking. But again, it was so strange going into a church with all the seats being removed and spacing. And, you know, obviously where the choir was, these high perspex sort of pieces held up and all on the floor with these arrows. I mean, I don't think I think in years to come, we're going to think this is all so mad, what happened to our society. Again, I'm sorry you can't see this slide. The town hall was lit up in purple for Holocaust Memorial Day recently. And that meant a huge amount to me, that we made sure, even though that we couldn't, there's the next slide was last year at the Holocaust Memorial, there were 500-600 people came to Middlesex University, and we had choirs and children, and we had readings, and I gave a speech, and I thought this year, how are we going to do it? And in fact, what we did was we had very kindly, the chief rabbi agreed to give a talk, and it's online now. If any of you want to go onto the YouTube, you can go and have a look at Holocaust Memorial Day 2021. And some wonderful, there's a fantastic Holocaust survivor, Marla Trubrish, who very kindly gave her experience throughout the video. It's worth watching how, when she first went into concentration camp, and then her story runs all the way through, and we had choirs in between. And as I said, the chief rabbi was there, and I'd watched, gave the introduction, and Bishop of Edmonton, he was there as well on the video, and many other people. And at the end, I have a slide here with Robert Rinder, and I contacted his press secretary and said, you know, is there any way he would end our video? It's really, I'd seen, I don't know, some of you might have seen his two parts programs where he talks about his family and the Holocaust. And I said, if you could, at the end of it, there was the most amazing gentleman who is the last survivor from Treblinka. And I said, if you could maybe explain about that on the end of our video. And he did the most, it is, I say, worth watching. And he summed it up, really. I mean, the whole thing, I hope it was, I think this year had a very powerful message. I'm not sure how we would ever do it again, but at least it was we had a commemoration. And if anyone wants to actually think, does our memory carry on? Yes, it does. There's a lovely thing that I did earlier in the year, and that was plant snowdrops. It started in 2007 in Barnet, that every year 1,000 snowdrops are planted. We're up to 57,000 snowdrops. And I've over the last 3 years been very privileged to do different schools. And at St Andrews, I went the local school that we did it at. I noticed all the snowdrops coming up, because eventually we want to celebrate, or at least that the children understand that every one of those bulbs, this represents 1.5 million children. Something that happened earlier last week, which was really bizarre, I was invited to the Chinese embassy. They do lots of things, because like with the starting off when we talked about more food, with the Chinese New Year, because we've got a large Chinese community, we were asked, would I attend as mayor? And it was the most peculiar thing, because I went on and there was the ambassador for China going on about how marvellous it is in Wuhan, and they were showing the celebrations for the Chinese New Year. And I just thought, you know, we've still got so many people dying in our hospitals. But anyway, the other thing I end really on is that this week I got a phone call from the vicar of St Mary's Church in Hendon, which is at the top of the Greyhound Hill. And I went along there, and the picture you can see is so many of their graves have been desecrated. They've been thrown and smashed, and all the crosses been thrown down. And I said, I will come along, and why don't we do a reading or something, and put like a daffodil or something on where, I mean, it's terrible. The tombs have been opened. And I said, because for me, this is so reminiscent of what happens repeatedly in Jewish cemeteries. So I finished with me on a motorbike, because that's what happened. But hopefully one day, I'll be able to send you the slides maybe, and you'll be able to put them onto your feed. But you asked me to talk for 40 minutes, and I'm very much looking forward to your questions, which would be very nice. If you've got questions, I'm very happy to answer them.
Madam
Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's extremely precise. It's exactly 40 minutes. So if anybody would like to ask a question, if you could raise it either through the chat room, or if you would raise your virtual hand, Don't wave because we can't see you, because we are on speaker view. Just to correct one thing, Matthew Offord wasn't on last week. He was actually on in July.
Oh, right, I thought it was last week.
Woe betide, I should put two Conservatives on 2 weeks running. I'm not sure I could cope with the abuse from anybody saying that we have favouritism.
But I'm not. I'm standing here actually very much as a neutral person.
No,
I don't.
I'm saying that somewhat tongue in cheek. So I noticed that I don't know your chosen charity for your first year, but I know that you took on Brian's charity, which is the Royal Free, that you took on for the second year, which obviously is really nice and meaningful that you should do that. I just wondered which was your charity in the first year.
So again, in COVID, how was I going to do my, I have a big fundraiser. So the last sort of few months, that was from March, April, May, you usually do a huge amount of your fundraising. And suddenly I was thrown into sort of disarray. I couldn't do anything. And, but nevertheless, I decided, and I was very privileged that my mother was my chairman of my charity committee, and with a huge amount of help from her and others, we did a virtual dinner, and we raised over £60,000 for Cherry Lodge Cancer Care and for Home Start Barnet. So that was incredible, but they were the two charities.
Wow. Okay. Very nice. I was wondering, of course, in terms of the numbers through COVID, and I've just seen that today they passed 500,000 who've died in America. They've just, which is an horrific number. And I just wonder what the numbers are in Barnet and how the hospitals are doing in Barnet at the moment overall.
Okay, so I think it's 843. I think that's right, 800, something like that. 800. I mean, I mean, these are not statistics; these are people. But it's in the 800s have died in Barnet, and maybe it's worth. Hang on, wait. It's 800. I wasn't 858 people today. That's the latest figures. But I think so. One of the reasons it's really worth explaining. Barnet has one of the largest populations in all the London boroughs. We've got nearly 400,000 people. If you compare it to something like, I think Camden, for example, you only have borough. They I think have 200,000, and that has significance really with things like vaccinations. But also we have the largest number of over 80s in any London borough, or over 85s. But also, it's very important, we have the largest number of care homes, care beds. And that's really where there's been a problem, because what happened was people didn't realise, of course, at the beginning of the pandemic, that someone that came, like even if a carer came into the home and we didn't know about testing, of course, and there weren't tests at that time. It just seems crazy that was the case. But so a lot of elderly people died. They were taken to hospital and died. So that's really why Barnet has a far higher level. You've got to be very careful when you compare countries. Like people often say Israel's doing so well, but they're a very young population. They're very tiny. I think it's 9 or 10 million compared to 68 million in the UK. So one's got to be very careful when you look at statistics. The last part of your question, you asked how we're doing in hospitals. Definitely in ITU, the number of people going, I mean, there will be a lot of people in there in ITU for a long time, because you've got to come off the intubation. So that's going to be sort of 3 weeks. They can't come out of ITU, so they have to. It's only really when someone dies or does get better that they can release a bed. But the levels definitely are. They're coming right down now. I think it's 120. I think today in Barnet.
You showed a picture of the, I think, 33 mayors of London meeting at Westminster Abbey, where the inauguration. I just wondered, do you have, in general terms, much collaboration between the different mayors or different boroughs? Do they communicate? And has it been more or less so during COVID?
Right, so that absolutely, there's a WhatsApp group that we all formed, and it was huge. I mean, whenever there are so many events that we have during the year that where all the London mayors come together, and there are lots and lots. We were a very close group of people, and we still do communicate all the time on the WhatsApp group. This year, of course, it's been a very transient year because some mayors have stayed on. I think at the beginning, the majority of mayors did stay on. Very few were handed over because at the annual general meeting that you have, of course, it was cancelled. And that it has to be done like that. You can't just say, oh, yes, sign it off. It has to be done officially. So that meant there wasn't really a cohesive group. So there are a few people that have got together, just generally. But the picture you didn't see when I was opening this Nigerian shop, it was the Mayor of Brent, Ernest, who he is from Nigeria and he's wonderful. And we've been to lots of his ceremonies in Brent. But he had asked me, because you have to, if a mayor comes into your borough, they have to ask your permission to come into the borough, and they can wear, if they want to wear their chain. And there have been mayors who've objected in Barnet, and it causes all sorts of complications. But so I would say this year, no, but last year there was a lot of cooperation. Like people would try, for example, Wimbledon, the mayor of Merton had said, do come over and we'll have a private tour of Wimbledon and we'll show you. And it's really interesting, some of the things that we were able to do. But of course, that's all out the window. So it has not happened. None of it's happened this year.
There's a question from David Oliver, if you'd like to unmute yourself. There we are. You're on.
Hello, Mayor. Just a quick question. When do you wear your chains?
When do I wear chains?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose so I'm a ceremonial mayor, and because there are other mayors, like there's the mayor of Hackney, for example, but he is a political mayor, so he leads the council. But so I wear my chain whenever I go anywhere. You wear the chain. Obviously, I can't wear it now because it's worth a huge amount of money, and I'm not allowed to have it. It's kept safely. But so if I lead the council, so that's one of the things the mayor does. You have you preside over the 63 councillors in Barnet, that's the number we have, and you sit in the town hall. If any of you've been there, there's a dais and you sit there and you have a big chair, and a lot of that's really important. And I wear the robes, the red robes, and you have these cuffs, and you have a gilet, jabot, and you put on. It's a huge thing, and it's boiling hot, and then you put the chain on at these ceremonial events. So but I suppose the majority of times, and if you go out, so one of the events I went to was, there's the Lord Mayor of Westminster, and I was very careful. I will always find out if I'm allowed to wear my chain, and for some reason she didn't want us to wear our chain, so I went along, and you had just a little, the tiny little bit of it, but on a sort of a ribbon, and I went along, and I sat down at this thing. So we were in Trafalgar Square with the Lord Mayor of Westminster, and two other mayors arrived with their chains, and she went completely mad, this lady, and they had to take the chain off, and it caused all sorts of problems. So you've got to be your chain is worn generally when you go out and about, or when you're presiding over a meeting.
I thought you carried it with you.
Well, I could keep it in bed, and I could keep it in bed with me, but I don't.
Okay. You mentioned, I think, Spencer, if you're trying to ask a question, if you could raise your, it's just that you're lower down and I can't see you to be able to unmute you, unless Avi can do that. But if you could.
I've unmuted.
Ah, you're on. Okay.
Yes. You'll be aware that different wards have different proportions of religious groups and ethnic groups. Some of them have high proportions of Jews, some Christians, some Muslims, Hindus, and so on. During this period, can you give any advice on how we might all come together in some interfaith interfaith online? The CCJ, the Council of Christian Jews, isn't particularly strong in Barnet, and there must be some other mechanism for bringing the various religious groups together.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things when I explained about, I think by then the slide was still up with I said there's this community response fund, and I've been very central to that. And there's all the groups with the multi-faith forum will meet. If you look up multi-faith forum, Ez Rosen is the president, and he is from Woodside Park Synagogue. And at the moment, the chairman is somebody called Trevor Alexander from Middlesex University. And that's absolutely what they work for, is that there are many things that come together, events, and they've done lots during COVID. There have been all sorts of things that, so if it's Hanukkah or if it's Christmas, that they will do joint things, or if it's the if it's one of the Muslim events, that we will celebrate it, and I will go along. I usually always go along, and with Ramadan, and we are very much Barnet. I cannot tell you enough how important this has been, is the bringing together of religions. Whether in food banks, you've got everybody standing side by side together to make sure that whoever they are, that they're fed, and all religions will come together and help. So they'll, the Hindu community are wonderful for certain things, and but it's been all religions. So the Jewish community, Gift I showed you, have been amazing. Because they will give out food, but they've been helping across all religions. So it has been very much pulling together. So you might not see it, but if you look up the Barnet Multi-Faith Forum, you will absolutely see the level of cooperation.
Yes, I'm familiar with that. I was wondering whether we could have some online facility occasionally where we could all come together in some form of Zoom meetings.
I think that's something that Ez Rosen is trying. I think if you contact Ez, I can't remember, but maybe I'll send it to David. But if you contact Ez, there are things where they do, where you actually can do Zoom meetings. If you email me, my email address is cllr, so it's like councillor, cllr.c.stock@barnet.gov.uk. It's online anyway, but I'll send you his email address, or look at the Multi-Faith Forum, the Barnet Multi-Faith Forum, and it will tell you. But they definitely do Zoom meetings, and I think there's something coming up soon where they'll have, with their different AGMs and things, where they bring everyone together.
There have been discussions today. I received an email from the Metropolitan Police talking about interfaith and
Yes,
different avenues, and mentioning all the festivals throughout, and possible collaboration as well between and the getting together with other religions and talking at that, which would be very interesting.
It's really important, and I know, like at Woodside Park Synagogue, Rabbi Huckenbrock, he's very much working together with the imam from Hamid, who is from the mosque in Finchley, and trying to make sure that we can, in my view, my very humble view, if the only way we're going to have peace on earth is if we all come together and understand each other's religions. And that's been one of the reasons why I have gone into so many churches throughout my time, and I've never been into a Catholic service before, but I went along and sat in a Catholic service, was to actually show that we all have to understand each other's religions so that we can come together. Because listen, COVID, for example, doesn't care about religion, does that, Boris?
No, it doesn't discriminate at all. There are a couple of questions in chat. One of them you've already answered, which is, why do you think the COVID levels were so high in Barnet? Which I think you answered to one of my questions about the hospitals. But another question, which is somebody wanted to ask, which is, how heavy is the ceremonial chain?
Honestly, it genuinely is really heavy. It's solid gold. And it is very heavy. And to begin with, when I first wore it, honestly, I got really bad. My shoulders really hurt because it has to be sort of pinned in. And in the end, what I've done is, if I have it slightly looser, so it's not actually pinned onto me, then it's not. It actually sort of, I can balance it a bit. But it is really heavy. I think you need a strong man to wear it. But But it's a beautiful chain, and in fact, the actual it's worth looking up what it means in the little sort of the actual sort of emblem bit, because it's got lots of different symbolisms, including the Jewish religion is actually included in there. I think it's the lamb is very central to it. So because we do have such a large, as you know, and one of the largest Jewish communities in Europe.
So to retain posture, the idea is wear a weight around your back as well.
No, but I did. I had to make sure I stand up. I've sort of gone the round shoulder because of it now. As I said to you, David, before, for me, it has just been a complete privilege to represent Barnet. It really has. I mean, everywhere I've gone, I've just thought, this is not me, this is the mayor going along, and I just feel very proud to be in that position.
I'm just wondering, you mentioned about obesity and people overweight, and obviously it's very easy, and I'm unfortunately one of those people who've put weight on over the last year, because it's extremely
like a lot
easy.
Of us, yes.
It's very easy to sit at home and just nosh and just keep eating. If the shortages were more about food and not just of toilet paper at the beginning, I think we'd be a lot lighter. So I put on, but I'm just wondering, in terms of Barnet, how it will approach what seems to be an ever increasing problem with mental health in the area, which has been brought about by this pandemic, and not just the elderly who can't see their children, but actually the young children. I have 2 grandchildren of 4 and 2, and I know the 4-year-old is just, those children just cannot get out. There's nowhere for them to go. It's they're tied up at home. It's awful that this is what they know of life. And I just wonder what Barnet's approach moving forward will be in terms of mental health, because I would imagine there'll be a lot more take up in terms of that.
Right. So I mean, so on my health and wellbeing board, the deputy, so I'm chairman, and there's the vice chairman, who is the leading. It just happens to be Charlotte Benjamin, who is wonderful. She's a GP in Hendon, and which probably some of you know, and she's also the deputy for the whole of, there's a new, Barnet have amalgamated with 4 other boroughs, Enfield, Haringey, Islington and Camden, and it's very, so and there's 2 other GPs sitting on the health and wellbeing board. It's a statutory organisation, statutory board that all boroughs have to have, and we're just redoing the strategy, the health strategy, and together with the GPs, so there are 3 GPs sitting on it, and all the heads of, so you've got the head of the children's services, head of adult services, they all come together, and it is very much within the new strategy, which is actually it's at the moment in its consultation stage. So if you wanted to add to it as a resident, you can, and very central to that is mental health and our recovery. Mental health recovery during COVID, as well as obesity. And as I said to you, diabetes is very central, and weight is very central to what I think how we can help people. And of course, it's going to be particularly important that people realise that some of I think you're probably aware that obesity has added a lot of the reasons that people have ended up in IT or have died have been overweight. And that again is we're known as the fat man of Europe. And that is very serious, because unless we control that, certainly our NHS will not be able to cope with diabetes and obesity, because people coming into A&E now, nothing to do with COVID, a lot, whether it's heart attacks or anything else, are all to do with what we eat and as well as our mental health. So that is very central to the new health and wellbeing strategy that's being formulated at the moment. And you can add to it, as I said.
And are there plans within Barnet to, dare I say it, to not to catch up, but just to start dealing with many of the cancelled operations and health issues that obviously have happened over the last year?
So what I would say is, and this is actually really important, that if you have something serious, that you go to your GP. And I know lots of people who have, in fact, one of our very good friends is having, it's terrible, he's got pancreatic cancer, but they're operating on that. There are still operations, and a lot of them are being done at the cold hospital. So where that Barnet hospital obviously has, there will be patients, lots with COVID, but their hospitals, and within the Royal Free, and if any of you have watched the programme, and as I said with Caroline Clark, one of their main aims was that main operations would not be cancelled. And what a lot of them are doing is they're having them outside in the private sector. And so although things obviously have been terribly affected, operations are still going ahead. If you need an operation, obviously some of the non-essential, like maybe if you needed a hip replacement, that there is provision now. So I sit on the five, as I said, the 5 boroughs have got together, and it actually has allowed us to have a lot more money and a lot of able to sort of cope with this. So places like the Royal Free are concentrating on one area. Chase Farm then will have all these cold operations, and they are going on as we speak. So all those operations every day are happening there, and so hopefully we won't have too much of a backlog. There will be a backlog, and I think one of the problems is that people have lumps and bumps and they've got coughs that they don't want to go to hospital. They're terrified to do that. Whatever, I would say, please do go to A&E if you need to, or go and ask your GP, because that's the only way else we will have a backlog.
Thank you. There's a question about mental health which has just come up, but obviously you've answered that. Somebody's asking, what is your proudest accomplishment so far, and what do you hope to achieve over the next few months?
I think my proudest moment for me was when I went, fun enough that I was telling you about the Lord Mayor of Westminster, and it was the Ajax parade, which I think probably you all know about, with the Jewish ex-servicemen, and we obviously for Remembrance Sunday is 1 week, and the week later we're the only religion that are allowed to go to the cenotaph and remember our dead. And it's just it's an incredible. I mean, it's really worth going when we're able to do it again. But I was chatting to somebody, because I love talking to people. I was chatting to this elderly man, and I said to him, I'm not really even sure where to go from where we were. We'd had like a buffet. Everyone had met in this area to go to Horse Guards Parade. And he said, well, actually, I'm the leader, the I don't know, I think this is whatever is the master of the ceremonies when I get there. And I said, well, that's fantastic. And he said, have you ever been on the parade? And I said, no, I hadn't. And he said, well, no mayor's ever led it before. Would you like to lead it? And I said, having done this thing with the chain, I thought, absolutely, I'm going to go and speak to the Lord Mayor of Westminster, because it's her borough. And I said to her, I would be very honoured if you would you, I've been asked to lead the parade, would you join me? And she said, you know something, Caroline? She said, I was at because of course, remember all this anti-Semitism that's gone on. She said she'd been asked to speak at a synagogue, and she just hadn't realised the depth of feeling of how vulnerable the Jewish population felt. And she said, so I would very much like to link arms with you, which we did. We went to Horse Guards Parade, we lined up, and my proudest moment was to go down the cenotaph to, I suppose, to thank all the Jewish people that gave their lives. And that to me was definitely the proudest moment. And I think, and she was afterwards, she wrote a very lovely letter to me. So I think, and she hadn't, I think for her, she hadn't fully realised, about the Jewish population as we were going down. I explained to her how important it was that, all the ex-servicemen could come on the parade. And then there was a second part to that, which you asked me was, what do I want to achieve? I think it really comes back to one of the questions that someone asked, is that, and really what I've done over the last 3 years, and that is trying to bring people together so that there's something, I suppose, about generous leadership, and people come with all sorts of ideas, and it's actually bringing, so if I can make sure that Age UK are able to, like with the heritage walks that I was talking about, that we can actually launch those together, and just to bring in, and you're talking about bringing all the religions together. I very, very much support the Multi-Faith Forum. And it's one of the things, I mean, they will definitely, I mean, certainly with the Holocaust Memorial, again, I tried to do to make sure it wasn't only about the Jewish religion. There've been other Holocaust, other huge genocides. And I think that's what I will try and do, and have tried to do, is to make sure that I do link people together. So it is, if it is going to a church, when I went to that St Margaret's church that I was talking to you about, it was very strange because they knew I was Jewish. A lot of they did a Don Alum. To hear in a church a Don Alum was very odd. But I know that I've become friends with the vicar, and that's what, like this week, the day before yesterday, when I heard about the desecration of the graves. I just said to her, I know what this is like and how terribly you must feel. Let's say, and she said, let's from the Old Testament, just read a short little section. So it's maybe trying to bring people together. That would be what I'd like to try and achieve.
Oh, thank you. There's one final question. David Oliver.
We were talking about religion before. A lot of problems with Haredim regarding COVID. We know all about Stamford Hill, but we know also that there's a lot going on in Golders Green, Hendon and Edgware.
Yes.
A lot more people than 6 people there. Personally, I think it's a disgrace, and I think most people do agree. But I can't see the police doing anything. I mean, I lived next door to Brian Gordon over Fulham, and there must have been 500 people in the street. And in my front garden, which I didn't mind, there was a liaison officer and 2 policemen in there. And I was looking, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And I said to her, I said, look, what's going on? And they all just shrugged their shoulders. And at one level, it was wonderful to show the respect to Brian. But on the other hand, they're breaking the law. There's 500 people there, all breaking the law. And I just, I can't get myself around it.
Right. So I think if you notice, I wasn't there. And it was a very difficult decision. I'd spoken to the Director of Public Health. I knew people were meeting, and that's very, very important that I was very concerned about the number of people. Literally, if maybe 5 people got COVID because they were all there, is that worth it? It is just not worth it. I think there'd been big discussions with the Safer Neighbourhood team, and they felt that if they broke it up, it would be, because they tried very much to respect religion. And Tamara Juretic has tried her very hardest. We have done many, many things together, as I said at the beginning, with messaging, but also there's a Jewish WhatsApp groups, and I have one of the Friday nights with it was I think with Rosh Hashanah, where we were desperate, and we actually did send out a letter saying to people, this is just, you cannot meet up, and look what happened at Christmas, the reason why we've got that big, huge blip of things of COVID. And so it's very, very difficult. There are a lot of, so Dr. Juretic has herself, she lives in the area, and she had gone round, she'd said we're very concerned about Golders Green. She'd gone along to outside one of the synagogues on a Friday. They quite clearly were breaking the law. And I personally would have fined them. And it's a very, very difficult line. What do you do when people know the risks and they're still doing it? And, it's all very well saying the police, honestly, if the police did suddenly do something, there would be a huge backlash. And that's something they've tried very, very hard not to do. I don't know. We don't know. We've had many, many, many discussions about this. And maybe it's a forum like this that we can all speak to somebody else, even if you have an effect on one person, to say, please, please don't meet up. I know that around Brent Street, someone's complained to me yesterday that there are 2 synagogues who are meeting up and they're not socially distancing, they're not wearing masks. I don't know which ones they are, and it doesn't matter. I don't understand it. You know, we have so many meetings about the Haredi community, and how sad is it that they feel that they're above the law, that you can have a wedding. But I think most of us feel that. So I don't know what the answer is, but I can promise you the Director of Public Health, who has huge powers, she can literally close the borough down. You know, if she wants to close a street down, she can close a street down. But there was a very, with Brian Gordon's, when everyone met outside the house, I think it was very difficult, and people wanted to pay their respects. He had such, you know, people were so sad about what had happened. I don't know what the balance is, and I can't answer that. And people are still, you know, it makes me so upset. Why is it? It's not only the Jewish community at all. By the way, we've got to be very careful. It's not there. Every community has people that do it. You know, but I still don't understand if you go into a shop and someone doesn't wear a mask. Why? You know, they know the risks. Anyway, on a positive note, the levels are going down and hopefully people are being vaccinated. I mean, on a positive note, Barnet has probably one of the best vaccination programs, and we're now open in pharmacies, we're open in surgeries, you know, so the people are accessible. They're hoping to open Alliance Park, or its new name, for mass vaccinations. Although interestingly, I'm not sure that everyone likes going to a big area. They like going to a pharmacy, or like the mosques are opening up. It's trying to make sure people who have immunisation hesitancy, to make sure that everyone gets immunised. But certainly we have the top groups have now all been immunised. Everybody in every care home, and all the people working in care homes, if they will take it up, have taken it up. So it's a very positive note to end that hopefully this time next year everything will be back to normal.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. It's been a very interesting evening. Thank you. We've gone over the hour. We've gone to 72 minutes. So
but I finished my talk exactly when you asked me to, so as long as that was okay.
You did. Thank you for that. But thank you so much for joining us and being here this evening and giving us such an interesting insight into your term of office, and I wish you continued success until the end of your term, which I believe is in May, and obviously continued success within the borough and for your successor. And we look forward to seeing you again. And again, thank you so much for being here. And I wish you well. It's my real pleasure. And I wish you good health always.
Thank you very, very much indeed. And I the same to your wonderful community. My grandparents are one of the first Jewish people that actually moved into the area, into Edgware, when it was all fields.
That's a while back.
That's a while back.
If I could thank everybody, all of you, for being here this evening. Thank you so much. I know Phil is with us this evening, so I'd just like to say to Phil and Nemi, sing a Mazel Tov on the occasion of Benji's Bar Mitzvah this Shabbos. You should have a wonderful weekend. You should go forward with good health, and Benji should have great success throughout, and obviously wishing Daniel Mazel Tov as well.
Many thanks, David.
And thank you all. I wish you all good health. You should all be well. Take care. I wish you a good Shabbos, a good weekend. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. We don't know how long the tunnel is, but there is light at the end of it. And we will be there hopefully very, very soon. Thank you again, Madam Mayor. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.